Okay, good evening everyone. So, since I can't have the presentation during our class discussion, so I'll be going to discuss my topic through video presentation. So, history and philosophy of science, and my topic is all about Chinese and Asian science and the Oriental worldview, or the Chinese civilization and Asian civilization. So, introduction. The dynamic and rich civilization of Chinese flourished at the eastern end of mainland China. So, the Yellow River traverses the North China Plain, the Yangtze and its valley to lie the south. So, there are five major dynasties of ancient China, which are first the Xia dynasty, Shang dynasty, Su dynasty, Qin dynasty, and the Han dynasty. So the contribution of Xia dynasty, so it was the first government to emerge in the ancient China and the first to adopt the policy of dynastic succession. So consequently, the Xia was the first dynasty of China, long regarded as the mythical construct of later Chinese historians. In 20th century excavation uncovered sites which corresponds to descriptions in earlier historians' account. So Xia dynasty was overthrown by the Shang dynasty. So Xia dynasty is the first dynasty in traditional Chinese historiography. It was established by legendary Yu the Great. So the contribution of Xia dynasty was, it's said to be the first to irrigate or to produce a cast bronze and build a strong army. So it used oracle bones and had a calendar. Si Zong is created in legend with inventing a wheeled vehicle. He used a compass, square, and rule. So next is the Shang dynasty. So the Shang dynasty, it must be said that the contribution of the Shang dynasty is, it has four in particular defined in dynasty. First is the invention of writing, the development of stratified government, the advancement of bronze technology, and last the use of chariot and bronze weapons in warfare. So, according to the legend, Cheng Tang, the Shang dynasty was founded sometime around 1600 BCE by a virtuous man named Cheng Tang. So who overthrew the evil king of the legendary of Xia. So the Shang dynasty was a monarchy governed by a series of kings, 29 or 30 in total over the course of almost 600 years ago. So the Shang dynasty was discovered. Much of the history the Shang dynasty has been deciphered from oracle bones in Anyang, which present in kingdom at war, with narrative of shifting alliance with other powers. Prisoners of wars were used as slaves or sometimes slaughtered for sacrifice. Next is the Zhou dynasty. So the Zhou dynasty was the feudal age when the feudal states were ruled by a lord who paid to the king of the Zhou to recognize him as the son of the heaven. So, the Xia dynasty was overthrown by the Shang dynasty, more historically certain governmental entity, which was in turn overthrown by Zhou dynasty. So the argument claiming the Xia dynasty is a mythological construct claims that the Zhou and the later dynasties wanted to make clear that the previous one lost their right to rule through immoral conduct and so created to proto-dynasty. So the Xia as the prehistoric model for this, many scholars today still maintain that the Xia dynasty is the myth, but seems to be at a loss to explain why the physical evidence uncovered argues against their claim. So those who believe the Xia dynasty was a reality are at an equal disadvantages in that none of the sites uncovered so far positively and identify themselves as belonging to the Xia dynasty. So the Zhou dynasty made significant cultural contribution to agriculture, education, military organizations, Chinese literature, music, philosophical schools of thoughts, and social stratification as well as political and religious innovation. So the Zhou dynasty, so what was the most important contribution of the Zhou dynasty? So during the Zhou dynasty in China underwent quite dramatic changes. Iron, ox, drone plows, crossbows and horseback riding were all introduced. Large-scale irrigation and water control projects were also instituted for the first time in Zhou dynasty. So greatly increasing the crop yield of the North China plain because in this time they already know how to make or how to produce materials using farming. So the government of the Zhou was based on the feudal system. The emperor divided the land into fiefs that were usually ruled by his relatives. So the nobles who ruled the fiefs basically owned the farmers who worked their lands. So in Zhou dynasty, there was a feudal age when the feudal states that were ruled by the lord who paid himself to the king of the Zhou and religious him as the son of the heaven. So let's move to the Qin dynasty. So the Qin dynasty is the main achievement of the Qin is the fact that it unified China, so creating the first dynasty ruled by the first emperor Qin Shi Huang. Other well-known achievement is the creation of the Great Wall and the large army of terracotta warriors. So how did the Qin dynasty impact the world? So, the Qin dynasty was responsible for the construction of the Great Wall of China. So, the Great Wall of China marked national boundaries and acted as a defensive infrastructure to protect against invading nomadic tribes from the north. However, later dynasties were more expansionist against and built beyond Qin's original wall. So that would be the Qin dynasty. So let's move to the Han dynasty. There are lots of contributions of the Han dynasty, which are the invention of paper, the suspension of bridge, deep drilling, the wheelbarrow, the seismograph, the blast furnace, the adjustable wrench, and the moldboard, and many more. So the Han dynasty was so the Han dynasty is more modern civilization after the Qin dynasty. Okay, so let's move to the Chinese writing. Chinese writing has been found dating back to the Shang dynasty around 1200 BC. So writing was originally done on oracle bones, usually turtle shells or the ox scapulae. other than on bronze, and later paper writing was standardized during the Qin dynasty in 221 BC. So today, educated Chinese people know about 4,000 characters. So the Chinese writing was originally done in oracle bones, or the ox scapula, ox scapula. So Chinese philosophy, it includes Confucianism, Taoism, legalism, Buddhism, and Mohism. So when we say Confucius, he also known as the Kung Fu Tzu, was a Chinese philosopher, teacher, and political figure. Confucianism is a worldview on politics, education, and ethics taught by Confucius and his followers in the 5th and 6th century BC. So, although Confucianism is not an organized religion, it does provide rules for thinking and living that focuses on love for humanity, worship of ancestors, respect for elders, self-discipline, and conformity to ritual. So his quotes: "Do not do to others what you would not wish them to do to you." And the superior man knows what is right, while the inferior man knows what will sell. So next is the Lao Tzu. Lao Tzu. So Lao Tzu was an ancient Chinese philosopher and a poet, well known for penning the book Tao Te Ching. So he was the founder of philosophy of Taoism, focuses on leading life according to Tao, the path, or the religious and ethical custom of ancient China. So he is largely respected as a religious deity in various traditional Chinese religious schools of thought. So when we say deity, it is being called the lords, or their gods, or their highest ranking lords, or hari. Okay. So he also believed by some to be an older contemporary of the famous philosopher Confucius. Mencius in 372 to 289 BC. He, also known as Mang Chi or Mang Tzu, was a Confucian philosopher during the Warring States period in China. So he was often referred to as the second sage of Confucianism, meaning second in importance only to Confucius himself. So Mencius is best known for his claim that human nature is good. So, second, science and technology in Asia. The science technology in Asia is varied depending on the country and time. In the past, the Asian civilization most notable for their contribution to science and technology were India, China, and the West Asian civilization. So in present, probably the most notable country in the Asian in terms of its technological and scientific achievement in Japan, which is particularly known for its electronics and automobile products. So the contribution of Asia to science and technology at present, it's probably the most notable country in the Asia in terms of technological and scientific achievements, which is the Japan. So kapag makakarinig tayo ng made in Japan, so we can say that the thing or the product is durable, which is their origin, or the most notable country in technological and scientific achievement is the Japan, which is particularly known for electronics and automobile products. Asia's great civilizations like those of India, China, and Japan have made a great contributions to the world civilization. Asia is also the home of several major religions in the world, such as Hinduism, Buddhism, Confucianism, Taoism, and Shintoism. So science and technology in China, Far East China had high level of cultural and technical development. Excuse. China's civilization occurred by 1000 before Christ and attained supreme development. China's greatest contributions important to the world civilization. Chinese conducted systematic observation and investigation on astronomy, medicine, and other natural sciences. So they developed indigenous technology in the iron casting, black printing, paper, gunpowder, magnetic instrument, and many more. So their invention adopted by Europeans. So Chinese have known regarding casting bronze of and iron weapon, which is called the metallurgy. So the Chinese have knowledge regarding casting of bronze and iron. So weaponry and agricultural tools were manufactured. So metallurgy in China has a long history with the earliest metal objects in China dating back to around 3000 before Christ. So, the majority of early metal items found in China came from the northwestern region. China was the earliest civilization to produce cast iron. So, meaning that China has really great contribution in the history, in the part of history, which they are the earliest civilization to produce cast iron or to made a tools for agricultural and weaponry. So next is the astronomy. So when astronomy in China has a long history stretching from the Shang dynasty, being refined over a period of more than 3000 years ago. So, Chinese astronomy emperors encouraged the maintain mathematicians to study astronomical truths, believed that knowledge of astronomy gave power over man and nature. So, royal astronomers used astronomical measurements and calculations, calculations which serves as the basic for the preparation of almanacs. So almanacs determine the duration of the month, dates, and equivalents of the day and night in all seasons. So earlier astronomers had problem with calculating the length of the solar year or our solar system. The universe. So, based on their observation of the cycle of the seasons, they calculated as 366 days for a year. So, finally, they concluded that 365 1/4 days for a year in 4th CBC. So it's being calculated the 12 months based on the position of the pole star. So Chinese astronomer calculated the time by the shadow of a fixed special stone pillar about 8 feet. So the position of the shadow of the stone pillar to find out the arrival of the summer, observe the movements of the stars, hasten eminent astronomer considers as the first Chinese star mapper. He prepared the star map of the universe. So Han Dynasty astronomers further refined these calculations. So in 28 BCE, astronomers in China first observed sunspot. So European did not make similar observation until CA in 1600 CA. Sometime before CA 1000 CA in 100 Chinese astronomers but instrument to track the movement of the planet. So in the Han Dynasty, so the astronomers or the astronomers in China first observed only the sunspot. So when the European try to figure out, so they did not make similar observation. And when the Chinese go back to their observation, they built an instrument to track the movement of the planet. So the construction of the astronomical clock tower in the 11th century is the great example. So they are making a clock tower in 11th century to trace the movement of the planet. So the ancient Chinese kept records of a wide range of celestial events, including the solar and the lunar eclipses, sunspots, comets, and meteors, guest stars, the nova or the supernova, planetary events, and the aurora borealis, and many more. So many events they are going to the records. So in medical sciences, so the armillary spear, that is the most important invention of astronomy in China by Xu Xu Chang in 1st century AD, invented during the period of Han Dynasty. So it was fundamental tool. This instrument used for the draw imaginary circle, which diving the sky for the movement of map making. Excuse. So alchemy, major work for Chinese, main aim discover of an internal medicine to attain immortality. So there are lots of Chinese inventions. So in the alchemy, this is the work of Chinese or the study of Chinese, which is their aim is to discover an internal medicine to attain immortality. Yung parang hindi tayo, parang walang kamatayan. So, Chinese developed medicines based on herbs and minerals. Perhaps the most widely known Chinese contribution to medicine is the acupuncture. So, Chinese gave main contribution towards the field of pharmacology. The Tias and Tiong Chi, important alchemical work written during the period of Han Dynasty. So, it was laboratory manual in the field of alchemy. Pao Pu Tu, written in 4th century AD, contains the alchemical purposes, discuss the creation of gold and the preparation of the elixir, single medicine for all the diseases to live long. So, in acupuncture, the body inserts the needles into certain points of the body to enable the life force energy to move properly. So, the two forms of therapy being studied by the Chinese or being contributed by the Chinese civilization. So they introduced the classical Chinese medicine, which is the acupuncture and moxibustion. So acupuncture, it is a method of encouraging the body to promote natural healing and to improve functioning. So this is done by inserting needles and applying heat or electrical stimulation at very precise acupuncture points. So it existed since the Han Dynasty in China over 2000 years ago, introduced in Europe in 17th century. So medicine in China was a characteristic mixture of empirical wisdom and popular superstition. So it had its beginnings before recorded history and produced great physicians long before Hippocrates. So ne- the second forms of therapy that they are being introduced is the mixobustion, which is in an ancient technique for healing all kinds of illness in China by using mocha or mugwort herb. It founded by philosopher Huangzi. It healing and preventing from illness just by smoking a specialized mugwort over specific parts of the body. So ini-inhale lang nila. Mosa sticks wrapped in paper. So There are there are two types of using mosa. The direct mosa placed direct in the skin. Indirect something placed between the burning mosa in the skin. Slice of ginger, garlic, salt, pepper, and mud. So burning of mosa against the skin to treat the pain or illness and fighting against cancer and asthma. So the plant Asian mugwort was called the golden grass. Traditional medical system followed in Japan, Korea, Vietnam, Tibet, and Mongolia. So Chinese technology. So magnetic compass was also introduced by the Chinese or being invented by the Chinese during the Han Dynasty period. So later adopted by Song Dynasty on China during the 11th century. Compass is an instrument used while conduct navigation which shows direction. So it reached European countries through the Arabs by 13th century. Later it's used by Portugal, Holland and England. Next, they are also introducing or they are also had the contribution of gunpowder. They are invented the gunpowder in 7th century by Chinese. Uh, the gunpowder formula potassium nitrate with 75 with proper quantity of charcoal, 50% of sulfur, 10% of to make explosive. So art of making gunpowder was introduced in Europe during the Mongols' conquest of Europe in the century. So let's move. So the gunpowder discovery led to the invention of firearms. So and revolutionized battlefields in Asian continent. So Chinese alchemists discovered this around 9th century CE. By the end of the 10th century, Asian power had introduced grenades, crude bombs, and firearms on the battlefields. Among the technologies of ancient China, gunpowder and firearms is regarded as most useful, popular, and also most destructive invention being produced by the Chinese civilization. So let's move to the paper invention. So the paper and printing, the invention of printing is regarded as one of the most important invention which made book cheaper cheaper. So the history of the paper making can be traced to Han Dynasty, so which ruled from 202 BCE to 220 before Christ. So the paper invention by Chinese eunuch Kai Lun, vegetable fibers and tree bark, old rugs and hemp weights were all put together in water and settled to form a uniform layer. So it was preparation methods of crude form of paper. Since 2nd century onwards, paper used as the substitute for sailcloth for conveying the messages or for relaying messages. So later, this crude form of paper strengthened with gypsum and polished. The paper making spread to Japan and then to Korea between 280 CE to 610 AD. Later, paper was made from bamboo and rice straw. So in 1348 AD, European began to manufacture paper. So, some archaeological findings suggest that paper in ancient China may have been invented during the 8th century BCE. Initially, this crude form of paper was not used for writing. It was deployed as a means of wrapping and padding. By the end of the 3rd century CE, it had become a popular medium of writing, and by the 6th century, it was even used as toilet papers. So paper was first produced in about 150 BCE. So by the middle of the CE, so 7005, the use of paper had spread throughout the Central Asia and the Middle East, where it's replaced papyrus as the main writing material. So the main writing material. So the Great Wall of China. The three dynasties contributed to complete the construction of Great Wall of China: Qin Dynasty, Han Dynasty, Ming Dynasty. Shi Huangdi of Han Dynasty constructed the first stage of the Chinese Wall in 221 BCE. Great Wall mostly built during the Ming Dynasty. Great Wall of China about 6,400 kilometers long. So the Chinese printing technology. So invention of printing in 8th century CE. The earliest method of Chinese printing used by wooden blocks. Chinese invented a way of using cut wood blocks to print text on paper between 704 and 751 CE. So during the period of Tang Dynasty, the invention of printing on paper occurred. Chinese printing copies of works of Confucius poetry, Buddhist teaching. By the 11th century, Chinese first invented movable type printing. So the printing, many dynasties or many dynasties and scholars from the ancient China contributed to the development of printing press. So around 868 BCE, with the printing of the first printed book, the Diamond Sutra, the book was printed with the help of the woodblock printing. It had become a very advanced technology by the end of the Song dynasty. So later invented the movable ceramic printing, the metal casting, and the rulers for movable printing. So the Chinese printing technology. So conclusions, beside the above mentioned invention and discoveries, the ancient China, also to their credit, have some other scientific innovations such as the first seismograph to detect earthquake, etc. Chinese have displayed their technological capabilities in many other disciplines like manufactures of firearms, agriculture, textile industry, civil engineering, and even archaeology. So the Oriental view. So a world view is the fundamental cognitive orientation of an individual or society, encompassing the whole of the individual's or society's knowledge and point of view. It's all about a worldview that includes the natural philosophy, fundamental existential and normative postulates or themes, values, emotions, and the ethics. So worldview is it is the collections of beliefs, ideas, images, attitudes, and values. So that's a group of people hold about things, universe, humankind, God, and future. So a worldview may be adapted, developed, formed as the result of an unconscious assimilation or conditioning processes. So worldview, it is a general perspective from which are sees the interprets of the world. So the history of the science, study of the historical development of science and scientific knowledge, including the both natural sciences and social sciences. So science does not assume final answer are possible, but good scientist accepts that no answer is ever final, that it is always possible that the contrary evidence can turn up, that is always possible that better theories will be suggested. So, so the history and philosophy of science and technology in China. So throughout of the Chinese culture from the earliest times of the present, so it has the keynote in Chinese philosophy in humanism. So when we say humanism, it is a progressive philosophy of life that without the supernatural beliefs affirms or ability and responsibility to lead ethical lives of personal fulfillment that aspires to the greater good. So, the ethical and political discussions have overshadowed any metaphysical speculation. It must quickly be added, however, that is humanism does not imply any indifference to the supreme power of nature. Instead, the general conclusion represented in Chinese philosophy is that of the unity of the man and heaven. The spirit of synthesis has characterized the entire history of the Chinese philosophy. So the roots of Chinese humanism during the transition from the Shang dynasty in 7th to 11th century to BCE to the dynasty, China was changing from tribal to feudal society and from Bronze Ages to Iron Ages. So, Joseph Needham, Noel Joseph, Terence Montgomery Needham, born on December 9, 1990, on London, England, died on March 24, 1995, Cambridge. He is an English biochemist, embryologist, and historian of science who wrote and edited the landmark History of Science and Civilization in China. So, a comprehensive study of Chinese scientific development. He is the son of a physician. Needham earned a doctoral degree in 1924 in the Institute of Biochemistry. His interest in history of science was evident from the long preface to his three-volume Chemical Embryology in 1931, which he published separately as History of Embryology in 1934. So embryology is the study of formation and development of an embryo and fetus. So in the late 1930s, his collaboration with Chinese biochemists sparked his interest in China's language and civilizations, and as a head of the British scientific missions in China in 1942 to 46, Needham traveled throughout the country collecting rare scientific books and manuscripts. After serving as director of natural sciences for UNESCO in 1946 to 48, he returned to Cambridge and began work on science and civilization in China. So, the work examined the relationship between the Confucian and Taoist. So, traditions and Chinese scientific innovation and explored the differences between Chinese and Western philosophies of scientific inquiry rather, sorry. So Feng Youlan, Chinese philosopher, he becomes a outstanding Chinese philosopher of the 20th century because because of his two-volume History of Chinese Philosophy in 1934, which is revised in 1952 to 53, which utilizes Western historical methods, established his reputation, and was the standard general history of Chinese philosophy until late 20th century. So in 1939, Feng set forth his own philosophical system in Xin Su, New Rational Philosophy, in which he converted certain in 12th century the Neo-Confucian assumptions, Okay, let's move to the Indian influences on Asia. So, an account of Indian education during the ancient period would be incomplete without a discussion of influences of Indian culture on Sri Lanka and Central and Southeast Asia. So, it was achieved partly through cultural or trade relations and partly through political influences. So Khotan in Central Asia had a famous Buddhist vihara as early as the 1st century CE. A number of Indian scholars lived there, and many Chinese pilgrims remained there instead of going to India. So Indian Pandits scholars were also invited to China and Tibet, and many Chinese and Tibetan monks studied in Buddhist viharas in India. So the process of Indianization was at its highest in Southeast Asia beginning in the 2nd century CE. Hindu rulers reigned in Indochina and in the numerous islands of the East Indian archipelago. So from Sumatra to New Guinea for a period of 1,500 years ago, a greater India was established by a general fusion of cultures. So some of the inscriptions of these countries written in the flawless Sanskrit show the influence of Indian culture. These are the references to Indian philosophical ideas, legends, and myths, and to the Indian astronomical systems and measurements. So Hinduism continued to influence in this land so long as the Hindu ruled in the India. So this influence ceased by the 15th century. 15th century. So China the ancient Chinese education serves as the needs of a simple agricultural society with the family as a basic social organizations. So the paper and the writing brush had not been invented, and the bamboo books then recorded to be in the existence were the limited use at best. So oral instruction and teaching by example were the chief methods of education in ancient China. So the molding of characters was a primary aim of education. Ethical teachings stressed the importance of human relations and the family as the foundation of society. So filial piety, especially emphasizing respect for the elderly, was considered to be the most important virtue in Chinese Asia or in the ancient China. So it was the responsibility of the government to provide instruction so that the talented would be able to enter government services and thus perpetuate the moral and ethical foundation of society. So during the Sui period, during the feudal age, the content of the education for the nobility consisted of the six arts, which is the rituals, music, archery, charioteering, writing, and mathematics. They constituted what may be called the liberal education of the period in during the Zhou period. So merely memory works was condemned as Confucius said, as the ancient spirit of education, learning without thoughts is labor lost, according to Confucius. So during the Zhou, this was a period of social changes. So Dong Eastern Zhou. So social changes was being brought about by the disintegration of the feudal orders, the breakdown of traditional loyalties, the rise of cities and urban civilization. So and the growth of commerce. And the growth of commerce. So the China's intellectual history when the 100 schools of the thoughts vied with the with one another to expound their views and proposal for attaining a happy social and political order. Some urge a return to to the teaching of the sage of the old, while others sought better conditions by radical changes. So among the major schools of this age were Taoism, Confucianism, Mohism, and legalism. No one school was in the ascendancy. They are focusing on teaching ideas for enhancing the prosperity of the state during the Chinese intellectual history. So they are focusing on the teaching ideas for enhancing prosperity of the state. So influence from the article of Taoism, it has strongly influenced the culture and religious life of China and other East Asian countries ever since. So Tao means predates the rise of Taoism and is used in all schools in Chinese philosophy, including the Confucianism. So it is literal meaning include way or path, or it is a road, course, speech and methods among others. So Confucianism may be understood as an all-encompassing way of thinking and living that entails ancestors' reverence, so and profound human-centered religiousness. So East Asian may profess themselves to be Shintoist, Taoist, Buddhist, or Muslims or Christians, but by announcing the religious appellation, seldom do they cease to be Confucians, or the family of Confucianism, or they are believing in Confucianism. So I think that would be the end or the last part of my topic. So it was all about the Chinese civilization, or the Chinese contribution to the periods of Xia dynasty, Zhou dynasty, Shang dynasty, Qin dynasty, and the Han dynasty. So that is the that is all about my topic. Thank you.